This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Lindsay Kozakevich. Lindsay is a third-generation farmer from northeastern Alberta whose path back to the farm took nearly 15 years and a few detours through male-dominated trades, workplace burnout, and a whole lot of life lessons. From bottle babies in freezing temperatures to building her own chicken coop, Lindsay shares how she rediscovered her passion for farming, found healing through horticulture, and reclaimed her career on her own terms. Lindsay's story is one of resilience, renewal, and a whole lot of heart. As you will hear in our upcoming interview, I actually had the pleasure of meeting Lindsay at a women's conference last year that I had the honor of speaking at. And I am currently booking speaking engagements for the upcoming year. So if you are planning an upcoming event or you are looking for someone to connect with your rural audience, either in person or online through storytelling and lived experiences, I would love to hear from you. Reach out to me and my team at wildrosefarmer.com/speaking and we can connect. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's interview with Lindsay. Lindsay, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
Trying to stay warm.
Yes, you are in the Arctic North compared to me in Alberta, and it's cold season here, which is good for us because it means we get to sit inside in the warm and chat and share your story. So I'm excited to see you again. I had the privilege of meeting you in real life earlier this fall at a conference, but we'll get into more of that later. So for the folks who are unfamiliar with you, Lindsay, give us your background, tell us who you are and where you're from and how you got your start in agriculture.
My full name is Lindsay Kozakevich. I grew up in northeastern Alberta. I grew up on this farm. After high school, I started in some trades as well as doing some college work. I ended up staying in my trade being machining. And then after a couple of economic downturns and too much volatility in the job market with my trade, I decided to come back to my farm and I pursued horticulture. I've always been in touch with gardening and growing things, and I've always loved having animals, so I've always had pets. And as I've gotten older, it's just finding more peace. And I was very happy to get out of the city. I am definitely not a city girl. So no, it's been eventful but uneventful. And as most farm kids know, you leave for a while as you hit young adulthood, but there's always a pull that brings you back.
Yeah, for sure. And you're a multi-generational farmer on this property. Growing up a third generation, what have been some of your earliest memories of the farm?
Some of my earliest memories is helping with cows, seeing the babies born, going with my baba mushroom and berry picking during the seasons. My baba always had an immaculate garden, so learning how to garden and preserve food with her. My sisters were a few years older than me, so they didn't obviously want to hang out with their little sister. So I spent a lot of time with my baba learning how she did all her preserving and growing and cooking and all that kind of stuff. And also learning how to be around the livestock. We had pigs and cows growing up, but my baba also had chickens. And I remember one time me and my sisters were trying to catch her chickens, and she used to sell her eggs, and the chickens stopped laying because we scared them so bad. So she was talking to my father in Ukrainian, and a couple of weeks later, my father went to the hatchery and bought us our own chickens. So we would stop harassing her chickens. We had our own pet chickens.
That's amazing.
So just, I don't know, growing up, we kind of, no cell phones, no internet, like being out here in the middle of technically nowhere. We didn't really have TV either. So we were always outside getting into trouble and harassing livestock, trying to make everything be our friend.
Right? I love hearing the stories of kids growing up on farms and being around their babas. My husband is Ukrainian and has the Ukrainian baba who, started this farm, and to hear the stories that she shares and to hear the stories of Justin growing up here on the farm always makes me a little jealous as a city kid who had the TV channels that they did not have. Just a different experience as a kid and seeing animals and seeing crops grow and all of those things. It's a really special time. And you mentioned, as a typical farm kid, a lot of kids, and especially in the age demographic, kind of grew up on these farms and moved away from them. Tell us about that decision of leaving the farm.
Leaving the farm was, as a young adult, you're always trying to spread your wings and discover new things. Growing up, I didn't really fit in with my peers. So leaving in part was a lot more of just kind of getting away and being able to express who I was without fear of judgment. Moving to a city provided me a sense of anonymity where I felt more comfortable learning who I was and learning my likes and dislikes and being able to express myself freely and not have to worry about looking over my shoulder or getting teased or getting bullied or whatnot. So I feel like depending on where you grow up and depending on your family connections, for me, it was being able to get away and figure out who I was, because I felt very stifled growing up when I was off the farm and I was going to school and having a part-time job and just, like I said, being around people that I had grown up with but never connected with. So leaving was one of those things. And then, I don't know, it's just, like I said, you grow up doing something, and farm kids, we have chores, we have responsibilities, we learn these things at a younger age. So when we do get to that, I guess you call it our rebellious teen years, in a sense, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, it was a sense of, okay, I'm an adult. I no longer have to do these things. So I want to go and do this. And those chores, those responsibilities, those learning skills that we gather at a young age, those always come into play going forward. I mean, I was able to get my start in the trades and oil patch in the early 2000s, where HR was not a thing. Women were not common in these areas. But the moment employers heard that I was a farm kid, I was immediately hired. And that came with, those employers knew farm kids came with a work ethic. Farm kids came with a toughness and like a thick skin that you didn't find with other people within that same age range. So it gave me an advantage with some stuff. And then just growing up on the farm, always helping to fix stuff, always operating equipment, dealing with animals. You learned how to read body language. You learned a sense of mechanical skills and problem solving skills. And a lot of times you had to think on your feet. So those were all skills that applied to going forward when it came to college or came to getting an apprenticeship. So that always stays with you.
Yeah. And I loved what you said about those skills, being taken off of the farm and being put into an industry. Like you said, in the early 2000s, not a lot of women were in the industry that you were in, giving you that advantage to know that you can do these jobs and you are capable of doing these jobs. Talk to me about being in a male-dominated industry that I guess is different than agriculture, right? Typically, agriculture is still viewed as a male-dominated industry, as well as I would say probably the oil patch as well. So talk to us about the early years, I guess, of not having the HR and being in that industry.
You know what? Looking back on a lot of stuff as a young woman entering that, and I was a bit arrogant. I had an attitude. I was raised by a single father in the 90s. So my motherly influence was my baba, and later on in my teen years, my stepmother. So getting into a male-dominated industry, I kind of had a bit of a, I guess you could say, male-influenced attitude going in. So I could handle and being, picked on and whatnot growing up in school, I was able to handle a lot of stuff that was thrown at me. There was many job sites where I'd be on where the guys would be like, "Oh my God, what are you doing out of the kitchen?" And, I'd just look at them and be like, "Yeah, that's what your wife said to you too, right?" Like just being able to toss it back at them. Not, you had to stand up for yourself. At that time, I felt like as a woman in that trade, in the oil patch, showing weakness was not an option. And you had to earn that respect. So you had to work for it. You couldn't skate by on flirting, couldn't skate by on your looks. You couldn't, you had to work. You had to earn their respect. Nobody was going to teach you anything. Nobody was going to accept you. And you weren't going to keep a job long if you did not earn the respect of your coworkers, who were always male, most of the time older than you. And then certain job sites too, if you went out on site, you would, encounter the kid, like the guys in your age range and whatnot. And everybody knows the reputation that those men had in the early 2000s. Not all of them, but some of them did. And, they would say a lot of sexual stuff towards you, and you had to be able to take it with a grain of salt, and you had to be able to set your boundaries. And again, don't show weakness and don't fall prey to, whatever they're offering or charming or joking around about. You had to keep a strict boundary about what you were doing, when you were doing, and how you were doing it. So it was a different atmosphere for sure.
And through your years and your journey through that career, would you say that there were improvements made, I guess, for the safety of women in that industry?
Yes, there was. There was safety improved for both genders, actually. In my experience, though, sometimes it was just a predetermined discrimination. And then there was other times where certain people, any ostracization that they got was kind of sort of earned. Like don't fall into a trap, and don't lead on either. Set a boundary and stick to it. Don't stray from that boundary. Don't speak one way and portray yourself in another. And I think that holds true not just for oil patch, but for almost any industry. If you are going to portray yourself or speak a certain way, you should also act that same way, not be hypocritical. So there has been a lot of improvements.
And like you said, it's not just oil patch, right? Like it can be said for any male-dominated industry, including agriculture, and specifically for young women who maybe didn't grow up in the agriculture industry, but have gone to school for it and are interested in working in agriculture and coming in and working on family farms or in corporations. I found that the culture in agriculture is different than any other industry that I have worked in or have been a part of. And I like what you said about the boundaries and setting boundaries. And I think having that integrity for yourself is important. And it can be said for any industry.
I think the big thing is having confidence in yourself, having a plan, sticking to that plan, and having the confidence and knowing and believing in your own skills and capabilities. As long as you have that confidence in yourself, it's very hard for somebody to tear that down. And then that makes it very hard for somebody to get you to stray from what you're trying to achieve. Whether you're a man or woman, you need to have confidence in your skills and your capabilities.
Absolutely. I love that. So you had mentioned, the economy was up and down, obviously, throughout your time in the oil patch industry. And that kind of prompted you to return to the family farm. What was that like coming back so many years later?
So after I left and I was pursuing my career change and schooling and whatnot, I still always came back year after year to help out with things. I'd still come back and, I'd hop on a tractor and go disc up some land. I'd come back and I'd spend a weekend picking rocks. I always planted a garden every year. That was my way of kind of grounding myself. And I've always had houseplants. So coming back wasn't terrible. The only part that was hard for me was the livestock, because it had been quite some time since I had to handle or deal with livestock. So chickens really are the gateway drug to livestock, because I find chickens, they're easy. For the most part, I find chickens are quite easy, even as baby chicks. They do require attention and cleaning, but not 24/7. So like my first introduction to livestock when I got back here was just, gathering the cattle herd, getting everybody kind of together, bringing them home, going through, having a call, looking through everybody, deciding what you wanted to keep, what you didn't want to keep, and all that kind of stuff. But my first big learning curve was in January of 2018 when my first bottle baby was brought to me. It was minus 43 when she was born, and her mother, who was also quite psycho, dropped her, nothing to do with her, and brought her in. So fast forward about 12 hours, and I finally got her to take a bottle from me. But that was my start. And then that entire season, I ended up with like 13 bottle babies. So I had a crash course in scours, I had a crash course in pneumonia, I had a crash course in vaccines, I had a crash course in bloat. So a lot of the schooling that I took when I was 18 and I didn't quite know what I wanted before I went into a trade, a lot of that stuff kind of came crashing back to me. And my local vet here was quite awesome at coaching me through it, calling her at 3 a.m. because the calf is bloating on me. And she was quite awesome about it, telling me where I needed to, stick the needle to deflate the pressure and stuff. So I think that helped me out a lot as well. And that's kind of what gave me that confidence going back into it. But definitely like coming back from my trade to the farm, when it came to operating or fixing equipment, I had no problem with that. I was good. I can't do engines, but I'm definitely really, really good with hydraulics. Any type of moving parts, because my trade was machining. So any type of moving parts, pumps, hydraulics, not a problem. Give me a gas or diesel engine, I can do an oil change. I could do an oil change. I know when a belt is going. That's kind of where that ends. But the biggest thing for me was the livestock, getting back into the livestock. That was my hardest learning curve. And that tested my patience, and that also tested my confidence in my abilities. Because when you have a calf die on you, when you're trying so hard to keep that thing alive, and they die in your arms, and that is heartbreaking. And any livestock farmer knows that. Whether you show it or not is not relevant. It is heartbreaking because you've done everything that you can. And then you see that smear campaign in the media about farmers and we don't care and we don't give. And it's like, no, that's so far from the truth. Our animal husbandry and our animal welfare is top of the list.
Well, and like you said, giving absolutely everything to ensure the health of your animal, and it dies anyways. I have to say, as somebody who has dabbled in bottle baby calves before, having one that didn't make it, it was absolutely gut-wrenching for me. But in the same sense, like even for me in selling meat goats, raising a goat from its tiny baby for it going to freezer camp, for me, it was the weirdest experience, right? Like it was for me, I've raised this animal and now somebody's going to eat it, but having that sense of pride that I am able to provide some nourishment for a family, that's for me, that was kind of the piece that made it all make sense.
No, that's fair. I mean, everybody has I feel like everybody has their own, I guess you want to say, internal process for dealing and coping and accepting what they're doing and what they're raising. For me, growing up, we were taught not to waste anything. So when it comes to, like, I do butcher my own farm animals, obviously not my bottle baby raised. That I kind of draw a line on. I can't do that one. But, like for me, the principle of the matter is when I'm butchering, one shot, kill shot, clean, quick, no suffering, no fear, nothing. And then you don't waste the animal. You harvest what you can from it and use what you can from it. And when I'm butchering, I do say my own little internal, I wouldn't say that I'm religious, maybe a bit more spiritual. I do believe everything on the earth is connected in some fashion, flora and fauna. So for me, I say kind of like a little prayer, basically saying thank you, because what that animal sacrifice is going to nourish me and my family. So I feel like most livestock farmers, they have their own internal process for, accepting what the end goal is. It's not always pretty, but it is what it is.
I had a guest tell me many years ago that their livestock essentially were their pets, and they were treated as such until they had their one no good, very bad day. And that's always stuck with me. And like you said, thanking that animal for what they're providing, I think I love that internal process for me. And as a person who didn't get to grow up this way, learning that as an older adult has been, it's challenging, but like you said, it's very rewarding, and it's being able to honor and respect an animal, I think, is one of the highest privileges that we can have as farmers.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. And just as a side note, my animals are 100% my pets. They absolutely are, because
I think for any livestock farmer, they are.
I have every single bottle raised heifer I've ever had. Those original girls from 2018, they're all hitting calf number 6 this year. I still, in their final stages here of pregnancy, when I go out to check on them and water them and whatnot, I'm out there because I buy those plastic horse brushes for your hands. I'm out there and I'm right on either side of their tail and their hips, and I am rubbing and massaging them, and they absolutely love it. But that also lets me examine them nice and close without putting them into a chute. I get to see where they are in their stages. I get to see if they're bagging up. I get to see if their hips are loosening. And it also makes those cows so much comfortable with me. So when they do have a problem or that calf does come out, I don't have an issue tagging. I don't have an issue helping them if they need help. So for me, those cows are out with the main herd as well, and the ones that are not bottle babies, but they've also helped calm the rest of the cows down to my presence. I can walk out there and I don't have to worry about somebody running me over again, because I did get rolled by a cow in September of 2018. I think most livestock farmers have had at least 1 or 2 encounters with a cow that was not okay with their presence.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to talk about when you came back to the farm, you actually enrolled in some further education, the Prairie Horticulture Certificate Program, which was a big step for you. What inspired you to pursue that piece of education to come back to the farm?
Like I said, I've always had a garden. I've always had houseplants. I've always started my own seedlings. I had friends at the time, if they bought a houseplant or if they were going to buy something, they would usually call me and ask about it. I had some knowledge of it. My sister actually she's the one who gave me the nudge to enroll in some classes or find a course fitting to my hobby/passion. And after some research and whatnot, I did find that certificate program. It's through Olds College, and they partnered with the University of Saskatchewan and Fort Assiniboine College in Manitoba. So the course is specifically designed for the prairies. And the part for me was I knew a lot of the concepts that they teach in there, but now I was actually able to understand why those processes worked for fixing your soil, for, the key nutrients that you see on your fertilizers, what all of that meant. So I was able to actually understand the inner workings of how like the nutrient pools in our soils work, how to fix your soil to build a more stable aggregate. That actually helped me connect the dots as well of using your livestock with your land and your current growing and your crops and whatnot, using how all those things were interconnected and how you could best use those for best management practices. So that part was actually quite awesome. And the fact that it was online, so I didn't have to spend 8 hours a day in a classroom because I'm not good at that. I can write, I can study, I can take notes. I need that break in between. Everybody has their own method of learning. So I think just it's important for you to understand how you learn and receive and retain information. And going forward, that can help you figure out what is best practice for you. So after the second downturn in 2016 and layoffs coming and everybody's getting laid off and whatnot, because that was the second time for me, because it was back in 2008 is when we had another smaller economic recession. There was layoffs happening, but they weren't to the same extent. But it was still scary. It's not fun to have job instability. And I think a lot of people understand that because a lot of people are still, dealing with that. So for me, it was having a farm, knowing that I wasn't putting myself in debt to acquire farmland and acquire a farming, head start. And working with my family, keeping this farm within our family for another generation, because this farm was started in the early 30s. And so that all kind of came into play. And then the horticulture, again, it was just something I've always liked. I've always enjoyed growing plants. I've always enjoyed working in the garden. I've always enjoyed being barefoot in the garden. There's something grounding about working with the earth. And there's something grounding about working with the natural system of things, whether it be livestock or plants or cropland. There's just something grounding about it. And that's where I always felt the most comfortable. And again, it's just something that I always carried with me. So it just made sense to go back to it, I guess. Yeah.
And how were you able to incorporate that in your farming business?
Well, that's still an ongoing thing. Because again, it's a family farm, right? I don't have sole ownership of anything here. So it's working with my family, but also working with my interests of what direction I'd like to see things going in. So I'm taking some steps with that this year and in the next and whatnot. This allows me I have my own greenhouse that I'm putting up this year. So I have my own seedlings and bedding plants and seeds that I've saved. I do have a large garden. I haven't sold anything from it in the last few years, but this year I'm hoping to be able to offer my veggie boxes again for people in the spring and summer and fall. And this also allowed me to put together workshops. So lots of community halls and municipalities and whatnot are able, if they want to hire me, and I'll put on these workshops for people. And this just helps bring that knowledge to other people. I feel like it's good knowledge for most people to at least know how to know the basics of growing their own food and preserving it and how to store it for their own use. Food security, I feel, is another big topic issue within our country in the last few years, especially. And especially with grocery prices, they're going up again. We know this. So having that security of knowing that, okay, I can grow my own food in a small space. I can learn how to can and pickle and take care of those things. And I can learn how to store some of my root vegetables and whatnot without needing any special equipment or having to build a specific basement or whatnot. So that's all stuff that I like to offer for, people to learn and whatnot. And so those are there. And when I was working for my municipality, those were workshops that we did put on just within our municipality. So by kind of going off on my own, I'm offering those services outside of my municipality because I don't feel that it is something that should be, I guess, unattainable for people to learn. And there's so many other resources out there for people, but there's going to be people who learn best from a hands-on demo versus reading 3 pages from somebody's book on how to do it. Some people are great at doing that. Other people are not. So that's being out here. I get to do that stuff every year for myself and some of my closer friends. And then that knowledge is available to other people who are interested in learning that. And I'm not tied or restricted on when or how I can do it.
I want to talk a little bit more about that. And I had previously mentioned that I had the privilege of meeting you in person when I was a speaker at a conference in your local area. And Lindsay, I have to say that the story of meeting you has been repeated a few times since I met you, as I will recall how you introduced yourself to me after my presentation. I had this wonderful woman come up and thank me for my presentation and saying what I said and telling me that I have inspired you to quit your job. And the fear and panic that ensued after that for me was like, oh my gosh, what? I have to say, it's probably one of the most memorable moments. I will caveat in saying that you definitely had more of a plan than I ever did when I proclaimed I was going to quit my job.
You know what? In all fairness, I'm one of those people. I do have anxiety. It's obviously managed. But that being said, I've had anxiety like for most of my life. And the thing with that is that you come up with like so many scenarios that may or may not happen. And anybody with anybody who has even mild anxiety will completely understand this. What happens is you end up coming up with a plan A through G for a scenario that your brain has decided that you need to think about. And it's so, like I told you, this was something I'd been kind of wrestling with for a while because I wanted to take my future into my own hands. I wanted to be in control of, again, how and where I got to do things and what I got to offer. I didn't want to be limited on that. And I had already had quite a few plans. Yeah, okay, well, if this doesn't work, I can do this. And if this doesn't work, I can go this way. And if this works, I can also do this. And like everything was in there. It just came down to needing a push. Because at that time, I know there's many people who have done this, many people, but did I know them? No, I did not. So at that time, I felt like I was, I guess you could say, kind of on my own in how I was feeling and thinking about things. And then being invited to be there at the women's conference. And again, you were like the first speaker. And I just found your story so inspiring. It was an emotional moment for me because I'm listening to you and you're telling, you're sharing your story. And there was a lot of elements of your story that resonated with me and how I was feeling and thinking. And, seeing you and hearing your story and your struggles. And it was just very inspiring because you were somebody who didn't have my background growing up. You were somebody who had a completely different career path than what I had. And hey, you were doing this. And you were successful and you were enjoying. And, your presence alone told me that you were happy with your choices. You were happy with how things turned out for you. And if you could do that, then there was no reason why I couldn't. So yes, your story 100% inspired me to make that choice because it was a choice I had been wrestling with for a while. And while there were some other factors kind of at play with me and my choice to do what I was doing, ultimately, knowing that somebody else was there sharing her story of how she did it, it was like, wow, okay, I'm not alone. There's other people who are doing this and they're successful at it. So I have a shot. And like Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of all the shots you do not take. So yes, you 100% inspired me. And it was a very emotional day for me because it was like, oh my goodness, I was very overwhelmed because again, I thought I was alone and I wasn't.
And that feeling of being alone is something that I know all too well. And I was speaking about this earlier today on another podcast of that feeling of being alone and not really knowing what your purpose is or if anybody else is feeling this way, but having that idea and pushing through all of those anxieties that, when I know all too well about the anxiety and the plan A through G. I could tell you every worst case scenario that could happen from any of these plans, right? And I knew,
but you're prepped for it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm prepped for the worst case scenario. And at the same time, when we do that to ourselves, we really stunt our growth. We really don't look past those possibilities of what can happen. And I know all too well the moment that somebody has shared their story with me and I find inspiration from it, it's a ripple effect, Lindsay. And what you're doing today and what you've shared today is going to do that for someone else, is going to have that impact. And that is essentially why I think sharing our stories, especially as women in agriculture and rural women, is so impactful, because we are alone a lot of the time. And when we are physically alone, we are alone with a lot of our thoughts. And when we can push past that and we can have those aha moments, either, by hearing somebody sharing their story or feeling that inspiration to just try something a little bit different, that's how we keep moving forward, specifically as women in agriculture.
I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't absolutely terrified of the choice that I've made and the things I'm doing going forward. I'm confident in them, but I'm also still, I'm terrified. I actually just confided in one of my close friends not too long ago, and my boyfriend. I'm terrified. I'm terrified. I get these doubts and I'm terrified that, okay, what if I didn't make the right choice? What if I did completely just screw myself? Like, oh my God, what did I do? And sometimes you end up sitting with those for a while and they play on you, and then you start panicking and you're like, oh my God, I just made a huge mistake. And then something happens. Like, I go outside and all the replacement heifers that I kept back for this coming year, I go out there. And some of them were born to skittish mothers, and some of them are still skittish. But then I go out there and I talk to them. Yes, I've already named, and I know you're not supposed to name them, but they're named. Most of them are named. And they come up to me and they're quiet, and I'm petting them and I'm booping them on the nose and I'm giving them treats. They love bread. And by the way, cows love apples. Unaware of that, because I have a pot-bellied pig sitting in there with them, because herd animal, but I'm only having one. So I go out there to give her snacks and treats, and then the yearlings are like, hey, what's that? And I'm like, you want to try some apple? And they love apples. And little things like that give me that confidence again, because I'm like, these guys are trusting me. Their lives are technically in my hands, and they are trusting me to do what's best for them. So how can I be wrong in my decision if these animals are trusting me enough to come up and, give me that physical contact? So little things like that happen. And I mean, again, my friend and my boyfriend, they're amazing. And I can tell them my fears and what I'm scared of, and they're right there, boosting my confidence. And my friend herself is telling me that I'm inspiring her. And then I'm like, it's very emotional. Oh God, why am I emotional all the time right now? But it is terrifying.
We call it misty on the Rural Woman podcast. We're not emotional. We're just a little misty. And you're making me a little misty over here hearing this. So
you know what? I'm in my early 40s. I never ended up having children of my own. I did get diagnosed. I'm in early perimenopause as of last year. And ever since that diagnosis, because I also spent a year prior to that thinking I was absolutely crazy, and some of the doctors I was seeing made me feel like I was absolutely crazy. And I'm like, no, something's not right. And ever since that diagnosis has come through, I find that I'm emotional over things that I never would have been emotional about before. Oh, so terrible. Oh, man. And that's another thing I feel like is not talked about enough for women. Like, we go through all these changes throughout our lives, and it's almost expected of us that we keep quiet and bear it. Don't tell anybody. You're fine. You're crazy. Don't tell it. Like, that's not fair. Everybody changes as they grow older, and I don't feel that it's fair that as women we are told to shut up about it. That's not fair. We're all in there. Like, we're all going to go through it. So, yeah, no, it does make me emotional, but it has also, I guess, made me a little bit more resilient. I feel like I'm in a stage of my life where I never overly cared about other people's opinions about me as a person or what I'm doing or how I've done things. But now I really don't care. If what I'm doing is not affecting your life in a negative way, I really don't care what you think about it. But then And every time I feel those doubts, anytime I feel that terror, now that I know about your podcast, I've been listening to excerpts and stuff from your podcast, and I find like listening to all these other women's stories, and I find that it gives me that confidence. It gives me that boost. And I'm really grateful that you started this podcast. And, it's a great source of inspiration. It's a great source of confidence, because in agriculture, especially, everybody says oil and gas is a volatile environment. Agriculture is just as much, if not more. And especially being a woman in a predominantly male-dominated field, like it is terrifying. It is 100% terrifying.
Right, it is. And I can't thank you enough for, sharing with us that, you've made this big decision and you've jumped in with your boots on, but you're still scared and you're still terrified. And I have to say, I get those feelings too. I still go through it, however many years later it's been. It's never a walk in the park all of the time, but like you said, it's those things that come up.
It's like a walk in Jurassic Park.
Exactly, right? And a saying that I always think of and kind of come back to is the way to get confidence. You have to have the courage to build that confidence, and you have to make those scary decisions. And sometimes they're not always going to work out. It has not always been easy for me, and it still isn't easy for me. There are barriers even 6 years into this podcast that I still face all of the time. And those are the times where I have to make the decision, am I going to move forward or am I not? And you really have to reevaluate. And knowing that there's always options. Something that I learned in therapy a very long time ago that I still use to this day is, when they ask you, like, how do you know that things are going to work out? Well, I've figured it out before. And that's kind of what I always fall back on. I've figured it out before. I don't know the answers right now, and I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I figured it out before, so I could probably do it again. And I think having that in my back pocket has really given me the courage to build the confidence to keep moving forward. And Lindsay, you sharing your story today, I know is going to inspire other women to move forward on those dreams or on those ideas that they've had. What words of wisdom or encouragement can you give those women that are listening today that might be on the cusp?
Oh my goodness. Well, like I said, again, it falls down to not doubting yourself, which is so hard. Oh, it's so hard. We're all guilty of it. I'm pretty sure, one of my things that I've always said is I'm a woman. My whole life is pain. And it is. As women, if it's not physical pain we're enduring, it's emotional pain or it's mental pain. We're women. That's what we do. So it's taking that and looking at it and going, you know what? I survived that. I can survive this. Or I've made it through that. I can make it through this. Have confidence in your own skills. Have confidence in your own abilities. But do not be scared to ask for advice. Do not be scared to ask for help. I would not be where I am right now if I didn't have the help. Do I talk to some of those people still? Unfortunately, no. But do I acknowledge that their help brought me to where I am? Absolutely. I've met and hung out with and gotten to know many people over my years. And whether it ended good or it ended bad, I've always learned something from those people. And so that I can take with me, and, it's everybody divulges onto a different path at some point. It happens. It's how we all grow. It's how we learn. But instead of dwelling on a negative, try to find at least one positive and take that positive. Because the old adage is true. Misery loves company. And if you stay in your misery or you stay around people who are miserable and bringing you down, it's not going to do you any favors, and you're not doing them any favors. You have to have confidence in yourself. And if you're doubting yourself, you need to stop and take a look at what's around you. Fix your surroundings, fix your own home, and then you can move forward. Just don't doubt your capabilities and don't doubt your skills. We've all learned things over the years that other people don't know. Your skills are what's going to help you survive.
Absolutely. I love that. That is key advice for anyone in any situation. We need to stop doubting ourselves. We've been through it before. We can do it again, and we can come back better and stronger.
As women, we're our own worst critics. I like beginning of the podcast. Oh my God, I should have put on makeup to look better or something. But why? But honestly, why? This is how I look. I look homeless 97% of the time. That way, I do. But that other 3% when I don't look homeless really makes an impact. But it just,
right? I look hot.
right? I do. There's like Valentine's Day, went out with my boyfriend, came to pick me up for dinner, and I actually put the time and effort in, did my hair and did my makeup. And the look on his face, I was like, yeah, I'm his hot girlfriend. By the next morning, I was like, I'm his homeless looking girlfriend. But so like, those are little things. And if that's what makes you feel confident in yourself, doing hair and makeup every day, give her. Don't let somebody else tell you what you should and shouldn't do. But if you're confident not doing those things and just doing what you have to do, then don't let that affect you. But as women, we're our own worst critics. It's how we were raised. And I feel like as women, that's kind of how we're conditioned from a young age, whether intentional or not. And it's something that I feel like we need to break. We need to break that norm. Like, just don't second guess yourself just because of something small like that. And I'm guilty of it. I'm 100% guilty of it.
We all are, Lindsay.
Right? And it's just a matter of like, no, stop. Like, you have to tell yourself, like, don't think that way. And it's difficult. But if you can tell yourself that and follow that, I feel you're 10 steps ahead of where you want to be.
Absolutely. Lindsay, it has been so amazing reconnecting with you, and I am so proud of you. And I know that your story is really going to impact a lot of people. So thank you for sharing. My last question for you is, what is the most rewarding part about being a rural woman for you?
Oh, there's so many. You know what? It's the sense of peace that I have. I really have no other way to really describe it versus everything that I've done in my life, versus every other job, every career, people I've encountered. Being a rural woman, doing all of this, I have an incredible sense of peace and connection to the earth and my surroundings. And I can't imagine trading that in for something.
It's priceless, for sure.
Oh, I love having my peace.
Right? You can't put a price on peace.
God, no.
For the folks who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
So online on Facebook and Instagram, you can find me, my personal page, Lindsay Kozakevich, or I do have my business page, which is Little L's, and little is spelled L-I-L, and it's capital L apostrophe S. You can find me on there. You can send me messages. If you wish to connect, you can definitely use my email, which is lindsay.kozakevich@yahoo.com.
We will put all of those links in the show notes so people can find you and connect with you. And maybe, just maybe, you will get that message saying, Lindsay, you have inspired me to quit my job.
Oh, goodness me. And the only thing I'm going to tell you is be like, please tell me you have at least 3 plans in place.
Exactly. Please tell me what your anxiety is telling you right now.
Yeah, just please tell me you have at least a couple, 2, 3 plans in place, just because it's life, right? Life's like, are you making water? Here's some lemons. Figure it out.
Exactly.
Right? And then you just got to turn around and replace your water with tequila.
Best advice all day. Lindsay, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being interested in it. And thank you for being at the Women's Conference and sharing your story. I can't imagine how many women you've inspired with your story.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer. A special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman Podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon.